Hola, buenos días, soy Nico. And today we're here to talk about something that's a bit more serious than my casual topics, but it's something that I actually didn't know until I did that Drummer Boy interview and found out more about Cocodorm. Because once I found out that it was run by a white man, even though it is advertised as a Black and Latino adult cinematography company, it used to have them think of like that. How do I? There's not a proper comparison. Basically, Cocodorm, they made adult cinematography, but they also used to do live streams where they would have black and brown queer men living in one large home where they would basically record the energy, the interactions between them, and of course the extra super happy adult fun time interactions in the bedrooms, in the living rooms, etc. It was lit. Basically, it was a hunch house. I can't say the F word, especially with not that much enthusiasm, but it was a hunch house where they would all just get it on and vibe off with each other. But basically, there's a reason why their Chicago based company office was closed down and they had to move the entire company to Miami. So when we have this discussion, you need to understand that it will cover heavy issues such as HIV and AIDS, and it needs to be held with a certain respect while we're having this dialogue. But basically, this video, let's start at the beginning. I already told you the premise of Cocodorm, and I already told you that it is actually run by a white person named Blick. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm not the most intelligent person. But basically, he got into trouble in Chicago where it was run first because the residents in the large home that he was housing these black and brown boys in were upset because they had adult cinematography happening, in their neighborhood. So they began to start a legal battle, the city versus him. And eventually he got that settled by going to higher court hearings. But I'm going to focus on the lack of testing and lack of screening. Nico, this is allegedly, but allegedly, they had a lack of testing for their models and they would have them all live in this home. And I'm going to have to use one of their models that came forward and was honest about it as an example, someone named Snow Bunny. Nico, when this original video popped up, I was not able to watch it because I was still fairly young in 2007. It's 2023. I'm 26. 2007, 23, that's 16 years. I was 10. I had no concept of it. If I did my math wrong on camera, don't at me. But basically, he came forward and he made a video basically saying that at 18, he contracted HIV. And it was undiagnosed for 6 years because he had no clue until the age of 24, where he began to suffer complications from the progression to actual full-blown AIDS. And at that point, he had done multiple unprotected scenes with Cocodorm. And it got to the point that the Chicago Health Department had to get involved because they had credible evidence that showed that the boys in this house were not being properly screened. They were not being protected against, the various STDs that were being transferred from HIV to syphilis to gonorrhea, because they were also infecting other people outside of the home. And once they came forward with that quote unquote credible evidence, the company got relocated to Miami. And that's not necessarily a shot at the adult cinematography scene at large back in those days, but it is something that no one really sat down to think about, for the sole fact that PrEP, the HIV prevention method that a lot of queer people use to this day, was not available for mass production and public consumption until 2012. This was happening back in 2006. So at this point, there was no way to prevent the transmission of HIV without a condom. So when that's taken into account and you realize that these companies were still doing unprotected scenes, because there is still a niche audience for it. Back in those days, you would usually see some form of protection, but there would be the occasional extra risky film of you know? But it goes to show you that not every company had the credibility of saying that they actively tested their performers. And I'm going to say allegedly, even though Snow Bunny's quote unquote timeline, where he actively told his story, lapsed the timeline with Flavorworks, because at that point, quote unquote, Snow Bunny said that he had contracted it at 18, but he was filming for Cocodorm and staying in that residence during the weekends on those live streams, hooking up with the other performers while he was in college. And he wasn't diagnosed until he was 24. So at that point, the timelines lapped. The city health department got involved, so the timelines clearly lapped. And it's just something that you have to sit back and think about. What was the priority back then? Because it definitely wasn't the safety of their performers. And this is all alleged, even though we have court documents, we have timestamps, we have blogs, we have reports. He ain't gonna slap me with no lawsuit talking about libel. He was getting bloggers back in the day. He ain't gonna get me. I'm gonna say allegedly, even though I'm giving you active and legal proof. So after this conversation, I will say I have a new respect for the studios that did enforce testing. I believe I did like an OnlyFans review on my Patreon of Guys in Sweatpants, for example, Austin Wilde. I know for a fact, because I used to watch his stuff before he became more white twink oriented with his content, because it used to be more of a melting box. I remember him actively saying that he wanted more representation in the industry, and then it just became white twinks. But he always gets his performers tested before every scene. I remember I would be on his Snapchat. He would be on the Snapchat showing off the performers getting tested, and it was a very responsible and consoling thing to do, knowing that these guys were still making money, but were also having fun and being safe to some degree. Because I always come on here and I tell you guys, it is important to get tested. It is important to screen your partners. So hearing that back in the day, the studios just didn't give a flying F is really disheartening. Allegedly, even though we have active accounts and the city health department had credible evidence that got them to move locations to a new city. But yes, definitely drop your opinions down below. Did you know all of this was happening with Cocodorm? Because like I said, I was 10 at the time, so I had no idea. I didn't even discover what a Bucci was until like I say 16 when I started wondering, like, what is that? But did you know about this? Did you hear the stories about Snow Bunny coming forward about his story? Because with him coming forward and giving his active timestamps, even with the allegations prior, it's aligning more accurately now. How do you feel about the industry now that it's become predominantly unprotected scenes? Because be it OnlyFans, be it studio scenes, no one seems to want to. This is annoying, I know, I'm sorry, but basically my microphone died towards the end of filming, but I'll just continue the conversation very quickly here. It was just like a solid 2 minutes. Basically, how do you feel about the current landscape, OnlyFans and studio no longer pushing for protection within scenes? Because honestly, it does get you better numbers, it does get you more virality if you do not use protection in your scenes. But do you also feel like that trickles down into the real life sexual landscape where people no longer want to use protection? I remember back when I was on the apps, I would ask people, okay, well, do you want to use a condom? And when I would ask that, or when I would ask when you last tested, I would get blocked. So there's still clearly a fear of diagnosis and a clear fear of getting tested, but there's still a push for no protection. Have you ever been in a situation where you asked for protection or asked for test results and you ended up getting blocked or they lost interest? Or let's just go back into the cinematography. Do you prefer to see scenes with protection or without? Because honestly, a lot of people like scenes without protection for the sole fact that it is embracing the fantasy of escapism. People aren't worrying about it on camera. They're just enjoying it and having fun and feeling good. But those are real life individuals on the other end. And not everyone is always up to date with their testing. But yes, definitely drop your opinions and your experiences down below. Boop. And now for a brief yet sincere shout out to my subscribers over there on Patreon, especially this week's Third Eye tier subscribers, Ryan and Kenneth. Your continued support is greatly appreciated. Thank you once again. And this week's live stream conversation is going to be over meeting your partner's special friends that they've had super happy adult fun time with. If that sounds interesting to you, definitely tune in.